So now that we know a little bit more about how the fuse graph works, let's actually put it into practice. In this case, I'm going to drag out a new auto rig component and start fresh. And in this case, I'm just going to use it just show that we have our FK controls all set up and ready to go. So what I could do is I can just plug this directly into an Apex graph, right? And then we can put this into here, and this could be our fuse, okay? So this is a good way to work. So we don't necessarily have to build our custom component underneath the auto rig builder, because if I open up my network view here, let me open that up right now. You can see that we have a lot of nodes, and it's quite complicated, right? In comparison, if we jump over to here, you can only see that we have a few nodes, and these are just the transform objects that are representing the actual joints in the skeleton. So it's a little bit easier to work with. And this is a good way to kind of prototype your setups as opposed to jumping directly underneath the auto rig builder. You can prototype over here and then kind of set, just kind of pass everything over to the actual rig. So let's just jump right in and let's start setting this up. I'm going to pin this, right, so I can see this no matter what. And I'm going to set this to fuse graph. Okay. I'm going to turn off mirroring because this isn't going to be a mirror setup. Now, let me talk a little bit about what I'm actually aiming to make here. What I want to make is a look control, right? This kind of look that sits out in front of the eye, that the eye will follow, okay? And I want to be able to blend between the head, or rather the spine position, and the local position at the bottom, right? Or like the main, here, let me, if I jump over here, maybe this will make a little bit more sense. So I want to blend between this position, okay, or that control, and then this control up here. All right, so that we can have the eye stare at a certain spot while we pose our character, right? Or have the eye follow the actual head. So to get to that, right, just to kind of set up a proper environment to work with, let's recreate this little C layout control over here, right? Just so I can have the proper naming and all that good stuff. So I'm going to put this over here. I'm going to say no. And I'm going to use the root component. I'm going to go to the driver, and we want this to be C layout, right? Because we want that name to match what we have over here in our actual rig, right? The rig that we created with the auto rig builder. So we have C layout, and we have this C layout. Okay, so this is working. And we want the driven to be this cog here, right? So if I set that to cog, now we're moving around our whole character. Cool. Let's jump out of that. So let's open this up, and we can go into our fuse graph, and we can just delete everything. Okay. Now let's start throwing down some transform objects. And the first objects that I'm actually going to want to put into this Apex graph is these parents, these parent controls that I want. So let me go here, and let's actually open up the actual rig here. So this is nice because with this pinned, right, with this Apex graph pinned over here, I can actually see everything update live in the viewport. Okay. So for instance, if I put down an input and I just bring that in, right, and hit N, now I can see my actual transform object. Okay. But let's get rid of that for now. So what we're going to want is the C layout and the spine 3, okay? Because that is where the actual eyeball is connected to. So we want, that's its direct parent, okay? This will all make more sense as I move along. So let's create our C layout, and we're going to get our spine 3. All right. Let's extend that a little bit more. All right. And typically when I'm working here, I like to, the controls that exist in my actual rig, I like to make them this kind of dark, kind of ash color. And it just kind of helps me remember what's in my rig already, right? Like these controls actually exist in my rig and what doesn't exist in my rig. So let's go ahead and create the two controls that I want to blend between, right? So I want one of these to be connected to the spine and another one to be connected to the C layout. So I'm going to make these yellow, right? Because these are going to be new controls that I'm adding to my rig. So in this case, this one is going to be called eyeball. We'll call this look head pose. And this will be eyeball look local pose. Okay? And we'll just parent these. All right. Cool. And now I want to, I basically want these to start at this eyeball rest position here, right? I want them to share the rest position from this eyeball because I want both of these controls to start at this point, okay? So remember, to get that rest position, all we need to do is throw down a value matrix 4, get the name of the control that we want, so just eyeball, double underscore, and then capital rest. Okay, now when the actual fuse graph is run, it'll automatically find this rest and apply it to these transform objects. So now if I take these and just promote these two controls and hover over this, let me press N. Now you can see sort of, hey, let me see. You can see that now I have the eyeball look local pose and the eyeball look head. It's kind of hard to see there, but it's definitely there. Here, let me see if I can get it. Yeah, just the white on white. Here, let me see. Maybe like that. There we go. Eyeball look head pose. Okay? And it's following the spine. And that's exactly what we want. Great. And then the other one is following the local control. Cool. So why don't we actually open up our actual rig over here so we can actually see everything be added to the rig. I always like doing that. I always think that's pretty cool. And we can also get rid of the timeline. We're not going to need the timeline in this case. So the next control we want to add is the actual look control that the eye will be pointed at, right? So I'm going to drag out, I'm just going to drag this out, and I'm going to call this eyeball look control. Okay. And we want, again, we want to be able to blend between these two positions, right? We want to be able to blend between the head and the local. So if I put down a transform blend and plug that into, we're going to plug this into the rest local. Okay, you see everything being added over here. And let's call this ILO control blend. Okay. So if I move my spine, and let's actually take this and we'll promote this as well so we can actually see it in the viewport. So if I take this, make sure we press N just to make sure that everything is updated. And now, if I can select that, now if I blend, we should be able to see those two being blend between there. If we actually want to see this, why don't we go ahead and add an abstract control so we can actually see this in the viewport. Okay, so I'm going to take this abstract control. We're going to plug the X into the blend, and we'll take the X over here, and we'll promote that. Press N. So let's move this like that. And now if I grab this, you can see that I'm going back and forth between these two controls. Okay, great. That's exactly what I want. So now that we have our abstract control in there, our nice little blend control, let's give it a name. We're going to call this I look abstract blend. Okay, and then we'll actually give the parameter name too. So we're going to say abstract blend, and we'll call this X, right? So abstract blend X. Well, hang on. Let's actually say look, abstract blend X. Okay, there we go. That should be pretty clear. So now I want to get this control to kind of sit up in this location above the head. Okay, so let's actually parent this to this control that we just made. So let's take this. I'm going to parent it into here. Press N, and now the abstract control pops up into that position. Okay, but I want to move it out like around here-ish. So let's make a transform build. I'm going to do a multiply matrix 4. And in this first input, we're going to plug in our transform build. And let's actually call this, let's see, abstract blend. We'll call it rest, right? This is our rest position. And let's grab this. And it's important to make sure that everything has a proper name when you're actually building out your rigs this way, because otherwise, you'll have name clashes if like you're gonna do another rig, like another fuse graph down the chain. So it's really important to make sure that you have proper naming here. Now we're gonna grab this eyeball look head position, and we're gonna plug that into here. There we go. Press N, see where we're at. Okay, everything is looking good. Now let's move this out in the X. Let's go about 1. That's a little too far. We'll go about 0.7. Hit N. Okay, that's looking good. Now let's move it up in the Y about 0.5. And that looks like a good position for me. So now if I move this, we can see that we can now blend between these two. Now that we have this abstract control in place, let's actually offset this look control, right? Because we want it to sit out in front of here. So I'm going to put down another multiply matrix 4. And why don't we just take that and just copy it. And I'm going to set these to 0. And we're going to put this out to about 1, maybe 1.5, okay? And we're actually going to plug this into the rest local. So let's see. So we want this name here, and we'll call this rest. And this is the rest mult, okay? And then we're going to put this, we're going to bring this blend, right? We're going to put this into here, and then put that into the rest local. So press N, so now this is sitting out in front of the eye. So now if I turn the head, we can see that we'll go back to that original position. Okay, and it's overshooting like that because I'm going from a value of 0 to 10, but we'll fix that later when we actually put down a configure controls. Now that we have all this stuff in place, let's actually start plugging this into this eyeball control that's sitting inside of here, right? This guy, because this is what we're going to use to drive the eye. So we need to set up a look constraint so that this is looking at this. So let's just grab that control, and this exists in my rig already. And let's put down a transform look at. Okay, this is going to go into the X form. Now if I hit N, we're going to see that it drops to the bottom here because this X form doesn't have anything in it. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to call this eyeball look at. Yeah, eyeball look at. So if you look at the actual component here, we can see that we have an X form, a look at, and a look up. So the X form is where we want the actual eye to sit, right? That's where we want it to originate. If I set this X form, right, from our look control and put this into the look at, press N, we can see that now we're actually looking at the control. Now, one thing we can do to actually get it to look at the proper control is change the look at axis. So now we're not looking backwards. So now we're actually looking directly at it. To set the proper position, let's create another transform object, and this is just going to serve as the X form in here, okay? So to get the proper X form, we're going to have to borrow this rest local again. I'm going to put that here, right, from our eyeball, right? So the eyeball rest local. And this is going to be parented to the spine. So now if we plug that in here, we'll press N. Now we have the eyeball sitting at the correct location. Okay. And now we need a proper lookup, right? We need a lookup axis. So we'll just put down a transform build. And that's going to go into here. So we'll call this eyeball lookup. And we'll just set the Y to about like 5, right? So it's always kind of looking up. Cool. So now we have this, and now if I blend back to the center there, to our local position, we can see that now we have our eye kind of staring at this specific spot. Let me actually set this to 1. Okay. Cool. So now we have this. Okay, so let's clean this up a little bit. I'm going to get rid of these promoted parameters on these two controls because we're not going to need these, right? These are just blank controls, really. Or they're just transform objects that we're using to drive this whole setup, right? So I just got rid of those parameters, but the one we do want is this eyeball look control. That sits right there. So since that is promoted, let's make sure that we give it a proper name. Okay, so this is going to be eyeball look control T. Cool, so now we have that. Another thing we can do is we can actually style our controls directly in the actual Apex graph. I'm going to put down a rig control shape. And what we're looking for is the actual X form. So we'll plug that into here. And I'll make a cross, press N. There we go. And if I make another transform object or transform build, we can actually start to kind of have a bit of a shape offset here. So let's see, we're going to go copy that name, put down shape, and call that shape offset. And we just want to rotate this 90 degrees, press N. So now that's sitting out in front. Cool. We can give this a color. Let's give it maybe like a purple or whatever color that is. Something like that. Now that we have the actual rig all set up over here, let's exit the state. I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call this eyeball. So rather eye look setup. Okay. And I'm going to copy this. And let's actually just put this directly into here. And we'll just fuse this directly into our existing rig. Okay. And actually, let me see. Oh, this is a clean component. So let's not overwrite that. Make sure that this has a name. Okay. Let's put this into a new auto-rig component. We're going to set this to fuse. Where is it? Fuse graph. And we're going to turn the mirror off because there's no mirroring in this one. And if I hit enter, we can see that now we have our full rig. All right. But we also have this look component that we just set up over here. So really nice. This is a great way to just kind of create, to prototype a component, and then you can just put it directly into your rig. Now, this is one way to go about doing this, right? I mean, you could just take this Apex graph and just copy and paste it over here. But let's say we actually want to make this into a reusable component that we can just put right into the auto rig builder. Okay, there is a way to do that. And in the next video, we'll explore on how to accomplish this.